I'm going to cover this first objective, and then Professor Kruger is going to do the objective related to metaphysics. And this objective, both of these objectives, the resources that are on Newlane right now are pretty good, and these are kind of softball objectives to kind of get you introduced to these philosophical fields of epistemology and metaphysics. But we wanted to kind of explicitly demonstrate, talk about these objectives. And I'll go into, I can't speak for Professor Kruger, I'll go into more detail than what I would expect from a student in a course hearing for this objective. Really, this objective, what I'm looking for are, can you tell me the types of questions and claims that an epistemologist would be interested in, would be inquiring into? After that, then it's just extra details and extra content. So I'll go into more content, but you don't need to feel like you need to memorize the different schools that I'll talk about or that kind of thing. This is a passage from one of the resources in this objective, the entry from Philosophy Basics, the entry on epistemology. And it just says, epistemology is the study of the nature and scope of knowledge and justified belief. It analyzes the nature of knowledge and how it relates to similar notions such as truth, belief, and justification. It also deals with the means of production of knowledge as well as skepticism about different knowledge claims. It is essentially about issues having to do with creation and dissemination of knowledge in particular areas of inquiry. Epistemology asks questions like, what is knowledge? How is knowledge acquired? What do people know? What are the necessary and sufficient conditions of knowledge? What is its structure and what are its limits? What makes justified beliefs justified? How are we to understand the concept of justification? Is justification internal or external to one's own mind? So again, this is all just from the entry on epistemology on the Philosophy Basics page. And so I'm going to break this down into a few different types of claims or questions that could be asked. So what is knowledge? Here are claims made by kind of different schools of thought in epistemology. So a claim like, I think, therefore I am, which we recognize from Descartes, that would be what Descartes and other rationalists could deem as knowledge. The apple is red is another claim that somebody could make, a claim of knowledge. The butler did it, another kind of claim of knowledge. A sauna is good for one's health, and I can ride a bike. So all of these are claims about a particular knowledge, and there are different types of knowledge in each of those. And then how is knowledge acquired or justified? So it might be acquired or justified just through logical reasoning, using the rules of logic and saying, well, this premise leads to this conclusion, or this premise does not lead to this conclusion, or we don't have sufficient evidence to reach this conclusion. So logical reasoning, sense experience, scientific experimentation, a tool or tactic that works, and demonstration. So you could see these more or less align with the claims. So I think, therefore I am, is just the conclusion of a thread of logical reasoning. The apple is red is a conclusion from one's sense experience. The butler did it, kind of scientific experimentation, but kind of let's rule out all of the other possibilities, anything that we can rule out of possible culprits until we get to someone where we don't have sufficient evidence to dismiss them. A sauna is good for one's health. That could be just something like, hey, I take a sauna every morning and it works for me. It makes me feel healthy. So I'm not claiming any scientific experimentation. I'm just saying this works for me. And then I can ride a bike. I can get on a bike and show you that I can ride a bike. And that demonstration justifies my claim that I can ride a bike. And then what is the difference between knowledge and belief or opinion? And this gets into different schools of thought about justification, what counts as a justification, and also what counts as true, what makes a claim true. And this can differ according to different kind of schools of thought on this. So I'm just going to walk through a handful of these. And so that top row is just kind of different schools of thought in epistemology. And that first column will be looking at the difference between claims, what counts as evidence or justification, and what are the limits. And a lot of it, justification and limits, a lot of that kind of goes together. So for rationalism, again, this would be like Descartes, a claim like, I think, therefore I am. The justification is, or what counts as evidence is innate ideas, rules of logic. It holds up practical experience, anything like that. This is just innate ideas and rules of logic and taking them to their logical end according to Descartes. And then the limits are what can be logically deduced from whatever innate ideas we have. Then empiricism could be a claim like the apple is red. What counts as justification or as evidence is what is supported by what you witness with your senses or logically connects with previous perceptions. So what counts as evidence or what justifies this claim, the apple is red, is the act of seeing that the apple is red. And the limits on this are what can be perceived. So if we're counting on our senses, then anything extrasensory is kind of outside of the scope of what can be known. And then the correspondence theory is just kind of saying what is true is what corresponds with reality. So a claim like the cat is on the mat, how can we justify that? Is, well, does that correspond with reality? And then we check to see, well, is the cat actually on the mat or not? And then the limits are what can be verified by reference to the world. And then coherentism is, so can make a claim like, the car my child is driving has an automatic transmission. And what justifies that are that coheres with other claims of knowledge that we have. So if I know that my child doesn't know how to drive a manual transmission car, then I know if they're driving a car, it's not going to be a manual transmission car. It's going to be an automatic or at least not a manual transmission car. And then the limits are what coheres with our other knowledge claims, or other known claims. And then pragmatism, this is kind of the school of thought, is that what is true or what is knowledge is what works in practice. We're not saying this is like by definition or after a lot of scientific experimentation, it's just this is what works. So a claim like ibuprofen is effective at relieving headaches. And the justification is, I have experienced ibuprofen relieving headaches. This is a different thing from a laboratory investigating, exploring what are the ingredients of ibuprofen and how they might communicate with nerve receptors in the head or in the body, and coming to some scientific conclusion. It's just like, hey, I take these pills, it makes my headache go away. That's all I care about. So it actually works. And the limits are what works. So those are a handful of kind of schools of thought in epistemology. I would say these are fairly prominent schools of epistemology. For this objective, I wouldn't expect a student to know all of these different theories or schools of thought. Really what I'm after are, what are the questions? So that you understand, for epistemology, we're looking at what is knowledge, what justifies knowledge, what are the limits of knowledge, what are different conceptions of knowledge and truth, how does knowledge differ from belief or opinion? Anyway, that's what we're looking for in terms of questions. And then this top row gives a range of claims that epistemologists could make.